Right.
I think stretch my wrist to hold it, so you're okay holding it, so you don't have to stand it. I'll hold
When
it.
I nudge, you can hear my. Shall I just jump in?
Yes.
Right, everybody, good evening. I'm Ant, for those of you who don't know or have forgotten, that's Sue, the better half of the family. Welcome to week 3 of the parenting course. Now that you've pitched up, you can all go home, because quite obviously you're the ones who have grit and resilience because you've braved the cold weather. For me, it's been a massive learning curve from South Africa to England in winter. And probably the harshest lesson I've had to learn is the perils of wearing long johns. Because before you go, you've got to do a lot of thinking and planning to prepare to go. And I've just made it on a few occasions. So I'm just very glad that you just made it here tonight. It is cold. A couple of rules for the evening. You met JP and Sharon, it's their home. There are loos inside if the cold does to your bladder what it does to mine. Lots of goodies on the table. Please enjoy. There isn't going to be an eating break. You just get stuck in right now. Eat lots, or else I'm going to get it for breakfast tomorrow morning. So please enjoy yourselves, relax. Our format's going to be the way we've done it before. There'll be input from me and Sue. And then there'll be opportunity to ask some questions of yourselves and chat in a group. One of the big things that we are trying to leave behind when we go is a village better equipped to support the residents in the village. And our village is 10,000 miles away. Pictures today of kids frolicking on the beach and stuff. And we sent them pictures of frozen ponds. It's been quite different. But what we've been really encouraged about in the first 2 weeks is the warmth of the connection. Very often people who don't know each other that well, you're prepared to share quite openly the challenges they've faced as parents, which maybe we wouldn't boast about because they haven't always been pleasant challenges, but they're challenges that are incredibly life-giving to other people, because the perfect family only exists in Hollywood. And we all deal with issues. And in a community, the ability to develop understanding for others who've gone before us, to learn from others' mistakes, and they're willing to share. And the opportunity to teach and speak into other people's lives from what you've learned in your hard knocks in life. That is a rich, rich heritage that we hope to leave behind. So we've had fun preparing. We've got quite a bit of stuff to go through on resilience and grit. After last week, those of you who are here who listened to recordings, you'd probably realize that a lot of what we said about screens actually applied to us as adults as well. And I think as we share stuff about grit and resilience, and it's not grit in the British sense of stuff you sprinkle on a road to give traction, but it's grit as in that inner deep dig resolve that emerges in hardship, that enables us to pick ourselves up and continue even though we've been knocked down. That's the grit we're talking about. So grit and resilience is something we'll be referencing particularly in relation to kids, but it will also be stuff where there'll be take homes for us too. So listen both with the parent ear and with your own survival ear. Viktor Frankl was an Australian psychiatrist and a Holocaust survivor, and he founded something called logotherapy. It's a school of psychotherapy that describes a search for a life's meaning as a central human motivational force. His most quoted saying is that everything can be taken from a person, but one thing. The last of the human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he chronicles his experiences as a prisoner in the Nazi concentration camp during World War II, and he describes his psychotherapeutic method, which involved identifying a purpose to each person's life through one of 3 ways. And picture it, it's a concentration camp where death was the norm, life expectancy wasn't. And as he looked at those who'd survived the horrors of a concentration camp, he could identify 3 traits, character traits. One is people who kept going because of the satisfaction of a completion of a task. And those tasks weren't nice tasks. They were vicious tasks. But those who could find meaning through completion of task, those who found meaning through caring for another person. So one task orientated, one very people orientated. And then a third group who found meaning by facing suffering with dignity. Now, common to all 3 of these root causes of survival that he observed in his fellow inmates in a concentration camp, all of these required grit. Grit to do a job that was horrible. Caring when you yourself were in desperate need of care. Finding meaning in suffering. All those things required grit. So his work was seminal in post-World War II in helping people understand, why do people survive cataclysmic things better than those who succumb to those pressures. So that's where we're going, over to Sue. We're not experienced DJs. I stand at a mic and I want to sort of boogie. If Sue drops her mic, give her a wave and she'll lift it up again. Okay.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. So I think that kids actually fear the feeling of discomfort and frustration in their bodies. Not a nice thing to have. And technology has actually helped parents and kids to override these feelings by looking at the screen. It's such an easy way out. I go to restaurants and there the kids are sitting on their screens while the parents are sitting having their meals. It's very handy because the kids would actually be getting frustrated, they'd be getting bored, they'd go home. And so actually technology has rescued us from that discomfort and frustration in bodies of waiting and things like that. Instant distraction from uncomfortable feelings. And so no grit is really very often needed. We just hand them the screen, put them in front of the TV, it helps us, it helps them. It's what happens. And so grit is not needed very often. And even boredom, and I said last week as well, it's so important for kids to be bored because only once they're bored and they've been bored for a while can creativity actually kick in and they can think of new ideas or even risk. You know, there's not much risk in sitting down and watching a movie, but it does take away any uncomfortable feelings, it distracts you, it keeps the place calm, it keeps everybody quiet. So we have ways to avoid discomfort, and so children have not always learned how to deal with discomfort and setbacks, and particularly delayed gratification. The whole thing of waiting. It's really hard for a kid, must be the instant, and it's really hard for us as parents. We actually wanted to shut them up and let them get what they wanted to keep them quiet, don't they? And then another thing with technology is that teenagers never have to look silly or look awkward because they just hold their phones in front of their faces. Whereas in the old days, you know, you'd have to make conversations. I remember having a therapy session with a man before phone days, and he said he finds it so difficult in a work social setting where they have, you know, everyone's standing around. He said he doesn't know how to make conversation, doesn't know what to do. What do people do now? They just bring their phones out. So, in looking then at parenting, one of the word parenting derives from is the word bringing forth. And so we are, as I said last time, I think the time before, that we are parenting our children for their adulthood. What are we bringing forth in them? And so tonight we're going to look at bringing forth grit and resilience in our children. And also there's a larger ecosystem of adults that extends beyond the nuclear family, who can be parents to and bring forth the next generation as well. And as we've been in JP and Sharon's house, we've seen many generations of people coming and going in here and seeing how other people are there to help to bring forth things like just values, important things, having good conversations, and hopefully bringing out resilience in grit as well. So this is an amazing group, and it can have a huge impact on young lives.
Now, why young lives? Why do kids particularly need grit in 2024? And by kids, they range from toddlers to adults entering the job market. I think the first thing they really need is they need the strength to deal with the cancel culture that goes hand in hand with WhatsApp groups, with Facebook groups, where there's a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out, when you see the great time that all these other beautiful people have and you sitting in your dark corner drinking cold coffee. So we need grit to overcome that artificial world. Many of those WhatsApp posts, many of the Instagram posts, many of the Facebook posts aren't designed to show a reality. They're designed to invoke envy. And our kids are faced with that on an ongoing basis. Secondly, they need to deal with living their faith in a secular world with many different religions. I'm not quite sure how it is in UK, but I've got a fairly good idea from Sky News and some of the things that we watch about the influx of people from other countries, often from France across the Channel, many of whom come from different faith systems. And we're very much aware that the British culture seems to be very accommodating of people who traditionally, if they weren't good Anglicans, wouldn't really have fitted in. And certainly in the South African situation, I had an organization called Scripture Union who tries to encourage Bible reading and Christian connection in schools. Well, when South Africa transformed from its apartheid state to the democracy, suddenly Christianity, which had been almost a state religion, it was the favorite, it was a cool thing to be, became one of a multiplicity of faiths who all had the same access to kids. And Scripture Union as a movement took a massive dip because suddenly the message that we'd been allowed to propagate quite often was no longer popular, and we had to create space for other people. Our kids are facing that in multicultural schools with multi-faith backgrounds. And then the third thing is that they constantly faced the pressure to conform. Soon I went to London the other day, and it was cold walking down Oxford Street in the middle of the night. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but it was dark and it was cold. The number of people walking with bare midriffs. And I think that the current female fashion trend is to have bare midriff and very baggy pants, so the wind like whistles around your legs. And everyone who's trying to be cool look like that. There's such pressure to conform, where sensible people wear full-length coats that look like sleeping bags. Our kids have this pressure to do illogical things to conform. And they also need, fourthly, to be able to regulate their own big emotions in a very confusing world. We've had quite a few discussions with people who aren't kids. And one of the common things with parents is when we were growing up, we didn't have access, or we didn't have the language to express half the emotions that kids have now. You know, if I told my mother I was depressed, I'd have got a clip behind the ear, pull yourself together. If Sue told her father she was feeling sick, you'd say, cut it out, Susan. You're not bleeding, go to school. You know, so we had very limited range of ways of expressing ourselves. But kids now, I hear emotional depth from an 8-year-old grandson. You can tell me how he's feeling in ways that I can't describe my feelings. So kids, to survive this, need grit. They need to be able to land and contextualize their feelings in a way that they succeed.
So yes, so even before we start speaking about grit, and in fact this is a very big part of grit, is our faith gives us strength beyond ourselves. And it's absolutely foundational in building grit in our children. Because, you know, just us on our own in the world is hectic enough. We actually need strength beyond ourselves, and we need to point our children to strength beyond themselves. And so how do we do this in our families? And we try to do it in our family. And I think the big thing is, how does one make one's internal values, beliefs, faith visible to the children, because we go, and what do the children see? But they are watching, and they're seeing what's real in us. And do they hear about us speaking about the marginalized and people different from us in a loving and a non-judgmental way? Do they see that unconditional space that we are providing for other people? Do we show exceptions to their friends who are maybe very different to us? There's the whole central thing of faith, which is loving God and loving others. Are we actually displaying that for our children? They can see through everything. Secondly, what are our family faith routines? And I know we didn't manage the family devotion thing because our kids were always running in 10 different directions, so we never got everybody in the same room at the same time for very long. But what we tried to do at night time is just to have a time just to each individually chat with our kids, talk about their day, maybe do a Bible reading or devotional reading with them, and just hear about what was happening within them. And that was often such a good time for kids to open up, and a time when they're much more open and vulnerable to speaking about what's really worrying them, and perhaps you can even pray with them. And then the third thing was, aside from regular maybe saying grace at meal times, what we did was we had what was called scrum prayers. So if someone was having a tough day or had something they were facing that day, before they left for school, we'd sort of huddle around the kid and we would just give a quick little prayer, just so that they felt that it was not just us supporting them, but reaching out to God who could support them as well. And I think that's a big part of strengthening them as people. And then we often shared life insights with them. Just share the stuff that you're going through, the things around your belief system that maybe you're questioning or battling with, or debate those things with them and share insights with them. And then finally they'll feel safe enough to share their insights with you. And then we also tried to make sure there was a safe and a non-judgmental space for them to speak about things like angry with God. Why has he let us down? This is terrible. There's no fairness in the world. Where's justice? They can get into that rant, and we must let them do that. We can hold that space for them, and we don't have to give them answers. We can just give them a space where they are validated. It makes sense that you feel that, because this isn't fair. This doesn't feel right, that there's suffering in the world, and where is God in all of this? That type of thing.
And my parent hack for that one is this lovely phrase as they vomit out their emotions and feelings and questions, to not give them the answer, but to say, wow, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Let's think about it. And you leave it open instead of being forced into a corner to come up with the answer that you don't have yourself.
Yeah, they don't actually need answers. They just want us to hear them and validate some of their feeling and say, let's work with this together. Let's come up with something. See what we can come up with. And then the last thing is we need to be grounded. Our children look for congruence. They look for what we're saying on the inside, what we're trying to teach them, and how we're living. And if we can live on congruently, they're much more willing to accept our values and our belief systems.
Richard Rohr is a man with an amazing faith journey, well into his 80s now, and we enjoy much of his writing. And he says one of the key ways to develop grit is to practice silence and solitude and reflection before giving answers. And for us as parents, when the kids come with those big questions, we allowed to go into silence. We don't have to give instant answers. We can go and think about solitude, what they've asked, and we can then formulate, as we reflect on our thoughts, a more appropriate answer to them than actually just spewing forth an opinion or a half-baked answer. So we really like that. He teaches that this space of being allows a space and an opportunity for insights and problem solving, and it neutralizes our knee-jerk reaction. We've seen that particularly with some of the American politics that's going on at the moment, where people are incredibly marginalized. And I was just reading something today that spelled out good in a person where I'd allowed myself not to see any good because I was one of the knee-jerk brigade. And so much of media forces us into polar opposite positions, whereas Richard Rohr says, before you move, ground yourself, sit, be quiet, think, and think beyond yourself. A definition of grit that I like Grit is a psychological trait characterized by passion, by perseverance, by determination, by focus, and by resilience. There are 5 things. I'll go through them quickly. Passion is basically a strong interest in an activity or a goal. It's what makes our kids come to life when they chat about it. In the Kloppers household, elder son Ethan, bugs. He feels more passionate about cockroaches than I do about good food. He talks about these things like they're lovely. That's his passion. And you engage him in his passion. And a guy I didn't know 2 weeks ago, I feel a connection with.
The second one is perseverance, the ability to keep going in spite of obstacles, setbacks, or failures. We'll talk a little bit more about that later.
And then the whole thing of the determination of really wanting to achieve success and to always progress towards that goal. That determination for us when we were in our running phase, that was the battle of mind over mattress. On a cold morning, getting up and putting one foot in front of the other ends up in your running marathons. But that determination, you begin with a goal in mind and you take small steps towards it.
And I think the determination also links to the passion, because it's naturally there if you can plug into their passion. And the next one is focus, to be able to keep concentrating on and working on things even when faced with challenges. And I think this also links to passion, because when you're excited about something, you actually want to focus on it. And even if there are challenges, you'll push through.
And then the third one of resilience. Resilience is the ability to bounce back when things go wrong and to stay motivated. It's a foundational characteristic in developing grit. I've been knocked down, but I'm going to get up and I'm going to keep going. So grit is not the same as intelligence, although being bright certainly isn't a handicap. Grit is not the same as talent, although it can certainly help us in our journey. Grit is not the same as luck, although who doesn't need a bit of luck every now and again? Grit is a key predictor of success, and it helps people overcome obstacles, stay motivated, and ultimately to achieve their goals. Okay, now we're going to get very clever. We're going to do a trick that Africans aren't good at. We're going to fiddle with technology. Because there's a high chance of failure here, those of you on the parenting WhatsApp group, we've actually sent pictures of the slides we're going to try and show you now, or the pictures we're going to try and show you now. So Sue will introduce it. I will work out exactly how to do this.
Okay, so you've got it on your phones in the meanwhile. The question is, how do we parent our children to have grit? And then the diagram has, on the vertical axis, you may have it on your phones, there's supportive at the top, and at the bottom is unsupported on the vertical axis. And on the
Da-da-da-da.
axis, oh yes, we've got it.
Good, yeah.
On the horizontal axis, you've got demanding versus undemanding. And then you see each of those quadrants are the different types of parenting. So supportive and a demanding in a positive way that you'll hear about it later, that is wise parenting. Demanding, which I would say more like taking responsibility or having boundaries, and being unsupportive in that quadrant is authoritarian, and that's a little bit too much because there's not a lot of support. And then there's the bottom quadrant, undemanding and unsupportive, that's neglectful parenting, and being too supportive and yet not having boundaries, undemanding, is permissive parenting. And obviously we want to work towards a wise parenting in order to parent our children to have grit. And I think there's a lot of talk now about gentle parenting, and we didn't have that language when we were raising our kids. But I really do believe that gentle parenting is supportive and demanding. I don't think gentle parenting is supportive and undemanding. And I think sometimes it goes wrong that way, where you be too supportive and not boundary enough. So if we're going to go to the supportive vertical axis, I did speak before in the first week for those who weren't here, there are the attachment needs that our children have towards us and which we have towards our partners. And when they look at our behavior above the line, below the line the questions they're asking is, do you really love me? In other words, am I lovable? Am I worthy? How important am I? Am I a priority? And am I enough? Those are the questions our kids are asking of us. And if they can answer them in the affirmative by seeing our behavior, not by us telling them, but by seeing our behavior, they will experience us as supportive parents. Then on the demanding one, the horizontal axis, demanding versus undemanding, I would rather choose accountability when taking responsibilities, but kids need to know that there are boundaries. And there should be appropriate consequences for crossing those boundaries. And that's such an individual thing in terms of how you as a family operate and how your particular child responds to these boundaries. You know, some kids you can just look at them in a certain way and they're ready to do whatever you want. And other kids you can seem to take every kind of privilege away from them and they still don't seem to respond to it. So it's it's a tricky thing. You've got to know your kid, you've got to know each kid, and you can't treat all of your children the same. And then within the whole demanding thing in terms of boundaries, they should also be not allowed to drop out of something or to give up on something they're committed to. So we had that, one of our daughters really wanted to do ballet. She actually wanted the outfit and the ballet shoes and all that. And when she started ballet, she was like, I don't want to do ballet. But I realized I didn't put enough into her sense of responsibility, into a sense of commitment. You know, if you buy all of this outfit for you, you need to go every week. And so the start of it is actually really giving the full impact of what this commitment is going to look like. And then to have an agreement that, okay, there may be a trial period, yes, and maybe after a month, if you want to give up, that's okay. But, you know, you as a parent need to work that out. But for kids to just go, I don't want to go next week, I don't want to go anymore, I think that is really not good for grit. And it's really hard for parents to push through and make them go through with what you've set up in your first time. So I think there needs to be an agreed on time frame that is reasonable for your child's personality, and also just for your family and how it works. And let them count the cost first. So they need to learn to complete things and keep their commitments. And so important just in life, in friendships, in work commitments, you know, we need to just not let people down. And then the next thing I want to talk about, which also sort of is around this theme of the boundaries or, you know, the guidance part of it, is there's a very much quoted Bible verse that says, spare the rod and spoil the child. And it's actually got nothing to do with disciplining children or hitting children. But if we think about what this rod was in the Bible, it spoke about the rod was there to protect the sheep. It was stopping them from going into dangerous places, which is what boundaries are all about. It was to rescue them, which is the crook. When the little sheep got stuck in a little corner, the crook was there to help them deal with failure and to get them out of failure and to help them to keep going and not to give up. Then the next one is the crook was there to keep them safe, physically and emotionally safe. And then it was also there to guide them, to show them the way, which is what we speak about a lot in this course, is about how we model to our children. The way we model to them, the way we are, is what they're learning from more than anything else. And then we also use that rod or that crook to lead them in such a way that they want to follow us. And another verse that is often very misinterpreted is that verse in Proverbs 22 verse 6 that says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old he will not depart from it. And it does not mean that if you teach him your beliefs and your values and what you think is important when he's young, then he'll stay with it when he's older. It does not mean that. It means the way he should go actually means according to their bent, which is according to their personality, according to their passion, according to their uniqueness. And I think so often as parents, and we were chatting earlier, I became a teacher first. My mom said, oh, you'll be a great teacher. Oh, you must be a teacher. I was a teacher for 3 years and I hated every minute of it. So I then became a psychologist later on in life, and that's my passion. I love that. But my mom thought, no, that's the way she should go. And actually, she didn't plug into the way I really wanted to go. And I think a lot of us have had that experience where we landed up somewhere which actually wasn't according to our bent and our uniqueness. But we need to know our children, understand the particular needs, and allow them to flourish in their preferred way, which is hard for us as parents, when we've got an idea of what they should be, we think would be best for them, what is the thing that they love? What is their passion? What is the thing that makes their eyes light up? What is the thing that brings them to life? And I think JP and Sharon are amazing, allowing snakes and all these things into their house. I'm not sure if I would have been so excited about that. But I did have kids who wanted rats, and that was really bad, really bad. And we thought we had 2 male rats, but they were actually a male and a female, and they kept having babies. Oh, no, really, it was their passion, it was not mine, and I had to let them have their passion. It's not easy, actually. So we need to encourage them in these things so that they follow the path that is life-giving for them. And then they can find grit, then they can push through, then they can have determination. We can help them discover their passions. They may not know what they are, but we can help them discover their passions and interests and help them in pursuing their goals. And this actually makes grit so much easier. They will push through because they love it and they want to do it. So I've got just an illustration about my nephew, Ben, and he was an A student at school, and my sister is a academic with a PhD, and her husband is a medical doctor, so they are very academically minded, and all they wanted to do was their A student son to go to university and get a proper degree, and he was not having any of it. And for 4 years he did 4 gap years, and my sister was beside herself. You know, he was doing bits and pieces of work, and she was finished. And by the time he came to 21, she was like, okay, let's give him as a gift an air ticket to travel overseas. He went to Morocco and he went all over and he did a couple of things. And on the way home in the aeroplane, he sat next to someone who was studying from a textbook. And he looked at this person and something came alive in him, and he said, right, I'm ready. After 4 years of a lot of waiting. And he then came back and he enrolled at University of Cape Town, and he started studying film and media at UCT. And actually now he's in about 6 or 7 years later, he's actually become a very, very successful actor and has a very, very good career. Very far removed from the academic medical stuff that my sister and her husband wanted for him, but he's flourishing. And he has grit, and he has determination, and he works long hours, and he loves it, and he perseveres. And that's the thing. So we need to deal differently with each child. And I mean, I've got 4 daughters, and each of them is so, so different. There was a different approach, a different way of dealing with each of them. And those of you who have more than one child will know that. And then I'm just going to look at the 2 types of children, very broad definition. First will be the highly sensitive child, because these are more the outliers, not your neurotypical child, and then the neurodiverse child, because these are the ones that are more challenging than the others, and these are the ones that require more of us in parenting. So the highly sensitive child, and in my work as a therapist, I find many adults who actually are highly sensitive adults, but they're actually being so criticized for being too sensitive, for overreacting, for you too much, you too this, and they actually end up shriveling up and withdrawing. And in my work, discovering that actually that heightened sensitivity is an amazing gift. You experience beauty of the world, you experience art, you experience the finer things of life in a richer way, in a more beautiful way. You have much more intuition and insight into things. But the flip side of that is life is tough, because you feel things so deeply, and you feel too much, and it can easily become overwhelmed. And so if you have a child who is highly sensitive, there will be more work in helping them to persevere and to celebrate that part of themselves, because that part of themselves in the normal world is not really celebrated. The go-go-go-ness of life and the busyness of life is what is celebrated. And that more tender, gentle person is not necessarily celebrated in the same way. So if your child is like that, bring that out in them, celebrate that in them, and help them to persevere even through those challenges and see the richness of what they actually have to offer the world. And then secondly, looking at the neurodiverse child, we actually have to tailor our approach to their specific needs. And for those of you who have neurodiverse children, I have a neurodiverse grandson, we have to celebrate the effort that they put in and not just the outcome. because sometimes the outcome is not good, and sometimes the outcome is not what we'd expected, and sometimes the emotions are too much and too intense. They are putting efforts in. What small achievable goals can we focus on? And can we find their strengths in there? They may be a bit more hidden because they're hidden amongst all the intensity of the emotions, but there's incredible beauty sitting there. They need encouragement as things seem much harder and much more intense for them. So the neurodiverse child has a much more busy brain. So sometimes logic and empathy doesn't always work, but they want us to see that they're trying to put things together. They're trying something. They want us to see that. And what are they trying to communicate? Even in their crazy communication, even in their communication that doesn't seem logical, good for us, what are they actually trying to communicate? In the neurotypical child, the brain filters out background noises and sounds, but in the neurodiverse child, sensory overload leads to distractibility. They appear to be not listening, to be not respectful, and not doing what we are asking. And this is happening when you're trying to get them to do something, and I know when I try and get Noah to do his homework, oh my word, he's jumping around like a bee. To get him to sit at that table and do his homework is a mission. Sometimes I need to move him to a quieter place, move him away from sounds that distract. And sometimes I have to break the tasks into smaller segments and then stop in the middle of it and do 10 star jumps. And then he jumps up and down and does his whole thing, and then we have to get him to sit down again. It takes much longer than it would have. And one of my big challenges with him is a haircut. Now, he would not go to the hairdresser. As a small child, he would many screaming matches having his haircut. He's so sensory sensitive that he can't cope with the feeling of having his haircut. So first of all, I have to bribe him a lot to get his hair cut, and I have learned to cut hair, but it takes a long time. I've got to make sure that every few minutes we've got to dust the hair off, and then he's got to run up and down, and then I've got to cut a little bit more, and then I want to cut one more piece, and no, it's finished now, and it's quite a mission.
And it's a very profitable business, unfortunately not for Sue. I'm sure you all go to hairdressers, and hairdressers cost money. With Noah, you have to pay him to cut his hair. And this little guy is getting quite a stash because his granny wants him to look cool.
So 3 tips just to finish off the neurodivergent part of this is, first of all, believe them, because their feelings and what they are perceiving is true for them, even if it doesn't feel logical and true for us. Just believe them, even if it's not our truth. Secondly, prepare them for what's coming. They don't like a quick change of plan. They don't like, suddenly, let's go, we've all got to go, and then they get into a complete state and there'll be a meltdown and can't find this and can't find that. So before you leave home, have a countdown so that we're only going half an hour, only going 10, 20 minutes, and we've got everything, and finally, when you finally leave the house, hopefully they'll be ready. And then also, if they're going, for instance, to a party or going to a place where lots of people will be and there's lots of stimulation, give them tools to cope. For instance, maybe even find a quiet room where they could retreat to if necessary during the party, or even have an exit plan where they can, if they want to go home, I think your friends will have to understand that they want to go home. And then also practice routine things that they find difficult at random times. Like, for instance, if they hate having their nails cut, let them play with the nail clippers and just fiddle around before you actually cutting their nails. And then they often operate in 2 extremes of either avoidance, where they just don't want to do anything, or flooding. Flooding is that overwhelmed space. And so we've got to help them see there's a continuum. It's not an all or nothing. Sometimes even noise cancelling earphones can be good, because if the noise is too much for them, they can put them on for a while, and as they get used to it, they can take them off. So as we start to understand and accept their uniqueness, they will gain strength to persevere and not to give up, and also to have grit.
And I think about it, exit plan as well. It saved our family gatherings, and the 4 daughters, they love to get together, and Sunday afternoons and going to Sunday evenings, and if we didn't kick them out, they'd probably be there on Monday as well. But with little Noah, Emily and Steve have just got this exit plan strategy. It's like ringing a fire alarm. You know, when the fire alarm goes off, you don't think, you just evacuate. And when that sensor knows which capacity and things about to go south, Emily will shout, exit strategy. And the whole family gets together and we get them packed up out of the house before the volcano erupts, and the remnant can then stay back and continue with the festivities of the afternoon. Now, Noah doesn't feel marginalized by the exit plan or the exit strategy. That's just what we do. And he knows it's for his good, because if we don't do it, it goes south. So exit plans, we love. Back to grit. We need to encourage our kids to do things that are out of their comfort zone. Now, very often this is something that gentle parenting doesn't do, and that helicopter parenting doesn't do. Jonathan Haytu, I mentioned in series 1, said one of the problems facing kids today is they don't have unsupervised play. And what that means is they're not allowed to run around the garden and jump off the wall. There's always watch out, be careful. They're not allowed to climb trees till they fall out. They're not allowed to go down head first down slides anymore, because there's a whole lot of stuff that we as kids probably did and learned from bruises, scrapes and bumps that it wasn't a good idea. Now, kids nowadays don't often have that opportunity. So we need to actually stretch them and celebrate them doing these things outside their comfort zone. We've got twin granddaughters as well. They're 11 now, and they became, I don't know if it's happened no, it hasn't. You used to have brownies and guides in England. You saw the guide shop. In South Africa, not cool to be a brownie or guide, you become a scout. So they became cubs, went into scouts, quite enjoyed it, and they're very, very close to each other, identical twins, very close to their mom. And the first scout camp they went on, boy, was there a lot of psyching up and packing of little goodie bags for them, and using my sleeping bag and all sorts of privileges to encourage them to go and do this thing, which they did. And as it would happen, wild storm in Cape Town, like a bad storm, howling winds, blew the tents down, blew windows out of cabins, and all the kids wanted to do was come home. And they went to Arcala, who was in charge of the camp, and said, please phone our folks. The folks, after twins, you start having kids. That's our experience. So this was the first time the kids had been away from the parents, and they were up in a mountain retreat having a dirty weekend. So it wasn't a good idea to phone their parents. So the Arcala luckily knew that and persuaded the kids to stay. And in fact said to them, I know it's tough, I know it's scary, but if you stick it out, you'll qualify for your adversity badge, which is a badge that cubs can get in their progress towards their leaping wolf. And the girls sucked up their discomfort, sucked up their need for mommy, stayed. And when they came home from camp, they were fetched and driven via our house, and these rather smelly, because that's what kids are from camp, bedraggled kids came in telling a story of victory and pride. And that set them on a trajectory where 2 months ago they were awarded their Golden Leaping Wolf, which is like the highest cub badge you can get. And it started off with them being encouraged to embrace discomfort and come to grips with adversity. And it led to an end of their cubbing career that I don't think they'd ever have dreamt of. So we need to become people who learn to welcome the big emotions of kids. Had the Arcala given in to their desperate pleas for their mom and dad, they would have never had that experience. We've got to work in the kids, get used to big emotions. If our kids' stress bucket is full, now I'm going to try my technology again. The stress bucket notion is quite an interesting one, and there's quite a useful little picture that you may have. Whoops, I've got to do this other thing quickly. Okay. Stress bucket, maybe it's looking for the greenhouse TV. Oh, JP, you're so clever. Okay, well done. Yeah, got it. He was right. Too many buttons. At home, if we have to do this, luckily we have 11-year-old twins who do it for us. So, we're getting there slowly but surely. There's a stress bucket. Bit of a silly picture. We just took a picture of a book. But our kids and we ourselves have a stress bucket. Now, the stress bucket is something which fills up with the chronic stress, the things of life around us, bad days at school, getting a sweetie fine, all those things fill us up. And first of all, for us as parents, if we are stressed up to here, when an episodic bit of stress comes along, that's when our bucket overflows. That's when we actually lose it. And it's the same for our kids. A kid has had a rough day at school, maybe having been bullied, maybe having forgotten to do homework, maybe have got a bad test result. They come home full up to here. Their bucket is chock-a-block. And the smallest thing will cause it to overflow, flood, and mess. So one of the strategies for both us as parents and for our kids is to identify those things which lower the chronic stress levels, just the stresses of today. And once we've lowered those stress levels, then we are better able to cope with the challenges that life throws us. So in order to help our kids to be tough and stressful, one of our challenges as parents is recognizing that stress in ourselves and asking ourselves, what do we do to parent better? How do we deal with our stress? And that could be one of a number of things. For some people, it's exercise. For Sue and I this morning, a bit of anxiety, got to prepare for the night. We went for a walk around this beautiful park over here and had a cup of tea in a little cafe. And we came back and put in a good hour or two of prep. It was great. That calmed us down. It lowered our chronic stress. It may be coffee with a friend. It may be time out. For a busy parent, that may literally just be sitting in a dark corner in your house whimpering because your spouse is out, kids are out, cat's up the neighbor's tree, there's nothing for you to worry about, and you can just breathe deeply. Anything through your senses that replenishes you would be one of those things that would help you empty your bucket. It may be sight. For us at home, in our backyard, we have a beautiful view of Table Mountain, that iconic Cape Town feature. And we can just sit there and empty our buckets. It may be sound. JP introduced us to, what's that brilliant band you played it just now? Future of Forestry. They've got a brilliant Christmas CD thing that JP introduced us to last night. Lovely. Music obviously does it for him. I loved it too. I didn't hang many decorations on the Christmas tree. I was just lost in this beautiful music. It may be touch. One of the things that I'd love to have bought my grandkids in one of the shops in London. Somehow clever Chinese people have made the softest trinkets. And you get squishmallows.
Squishmallows, yeah.
You get these funny little squeezies. And I was in a shock, just squishmallow in my face. It was lovely. It may be touch, it may be sound, it may be smells. The smell of a freshly brewed cup of coffee. The day wakes up better than maybe went to bed the night before. And the whole thing of taste. A South African delicacy which the Klopper boys found revolting is something called fish paste. Red-roe fish paste or anchovette. It's a savoury spread you put on toast. JP's got a jar of it. And the other day even offered me some. Because for a South African, the taste of something that's going to ruin your breath and spoil any chance of a kiss from a random person. This stuff is vile, but it's so essentially South African, and that calms things down. So there are three R's to think about. First of all, we need to learn to regulate ourselves and our kids, to calm ourselves down and to calm them down. We need to relate to the challenges that our kids are facing by listening to them, and maybe to fellow parents and peers in the village by joining them where they will hear you, where you will hear them. And then the third step, after regulated and related, is to reason, to try and settle into this space where there's been capacity to resolve and come up with a solution. Okay.
Okay, we need another one
Another
of
one.
these.
I'm going to do the next trick over here, and it is on JP, so we're winning a bit so far.
Yeah, so while he's doing that for resilience, we also need to encourage problem solving. Not solving it for them, getting them to try and solve the problem. Because solving the problem is motivating for them and gives them hope that a solution can be found if they keep trying. So when a situation arises, ask, what do you think we can do here? So you want to get them to solve their problem. Okay, so there we go. So the first question would be, what is the problem? Oh, we had it.
Okay, it's coming, don't worry. Okay. Ah,
There we go. Okay, got it.
there. Yay.
Okay, so the first question is, what is the problem? And the second question I've got written here, they just put worry, but what am I worried about? I think that's also, the problem can be external, this is happening, but why does that worry you? So find out closer to their heart, what is that, why is that difficult for you? What are you worrying about that problem? And then you've got two options here. Can I do something about the problem? If it's no, well, just have to let it go and focus on something else and do something else. Now that works really well with a neurotypical child. They can go, okay, well, I can't do anything about this, I'll distract myself, do something else. Not so easy for the OCD child.
And my typical example of that was Noah, where babysitting. Emily runs a dietitian practice in the house. She'd seen clients online. Noah fell and he gave himself quite a bump. And he just shouted, "I want my mommy!" loudly. It would disturb Emily and her client. So I tried to shut him up using logic, didn't work. And eventually I said to him, "Yeah, I want my mom too, but she's dead and yours isn't, so stop moaning." Stupendously unhelpful. It took about 6 people to calm him down after that. So you've got to, realize
tricky.
what you're doing.
Okay, so if it's yes, okay, then there's brainstorming the plans. Okay, what can we do? And just brainstorm. Find out all the things they think could be an answer. When would we do it? How would we do it? And just let them talk about that. And then the question is there something we can do now? Well, let's do it. And then let's do it and it's finished, and let the worry go and focus on something else. And if it's something that can be done later, we'll decide when it's going to be done. Maybe get out the diary or the phone or whatever and put it in there, and then let the worry go and focus on something else. So it's just a way of unpacking, because we actually sometimes just solve the problem for them. It's a way of getting them to learn to solve those problems, and that'll help them have grit as well when they're on their own and you're not there. They can also work out how to solve the problems. And also they need to know we are not stuck. Things can change and get better. And then we also need to encourage them to take responsibility for their decisions and for their mistakes. So say they didn't solve the problem and it didn't work out so well, but failure is an opportunity for growth, and it's an important time to join your child in managing their failures or disappointments. And I think sometimes kids will veer away from that. I know Lorata, our fourth daughter, if something's gone wrong, she says, "I don't want to talk about it, I don't want to talk about it." It's really, really hard to get her to talk about it. Sometimes I actually don't even get there, but I do sometimes manage to bring it around in another way and to bring it up at a different time. But I think it's so important for them to talk about that and to identify with the feelings that they have of feeling failure, disappointment, because then we can also normalize it and go, yeah, I've also had times like that where I felt like that. When it's normalized, it helps them to pick themselves up and also helps them to find coping strategies for them to be able to continue. So what can we do differently next time? And so if they're playing, for instance, a sports game, don't ask the question, did you win? But rather, what did you learn about this week's game, and what do you think you'd practice on extra more before next week's game?
So our third daughter, Hannah, was a sort of golden girl. You know, the first child has to eat vegetables. The second child eats some vegetables, and the third child just forages for their own stuff outside. Who cares if they're eating or not?
And the fourth one.
Hannah thrived, well, the fourth thing other people eat. And Hannah had a stellar high school career and was invited back to her 10th anniversary after finishing high school, where in her final year she was the head girl at the school. She had academic colours, she had sporting colours, she had cultural honours, and the school inviting her back obviously wanted to invite her back in their thinking of, here's somebody that you should try to emulate because she did so well. And her Founders Day address to the school was not about how she'd done what she'd done and how easy it was. She addressed the school about the obstacles she had to overcome in her journey to those things. In being head girl, great honour, but you lose all your friends because you're viewed as part of the establishment, the stooge. As the leading star in the school plays, for which she got drama colours, envy from all the other girls and bitchiness. The whole thing of being the big sport person, those who aren't in the team actually don't like you, they don't cheer you on. And she just told the story of overcoming adversity and coming back to her 10th anniversary. It was a couple of weeks after her husband was diagnosed with stage 4 brain tumour, glioblastoma, inoperable, and he was on chemo, radiation, he'd lost all his hair, and the shadow of Jono, her husband, and their unknown future fell heavily over her. She addressed the school, and her message was not about look how great I am, or look at how much life owes you, or look at the good things you're going to get. Her message was rather that effort is always more important than outcome. Effort is always more important than outcome. And if we can encourage our kids and be encouraged ourselves by that notion, then when children set goals, we need to make sure that they are achievable. They're things we want them to do, but bite-sized chunks. The old African proverb, you can eat an elephant one bite at a time. You don't say eat the elephant, you say start off with its toenail, and you may eventually eat the whole thing. And so it is with goal setting with our kids. Achievable goals that you can celebrate their success with, that you can help them pick themselves up if they stumble over the first hurdle. So we can do it ourselves too. Now the challenges of parenting are not to produce the perfect child that's the envy of the neighbourhood. The challenges of parenting are getting through today sane. And we do that by giving ourselves grace, setting ourselves small achievable targets, and doing exactly the same thing for our kids. When our children set goals, make sure they're achievable. We set goals, make them reasonable for yourself, and celebrate progress as both them and us as we work together towards achieving those goals.
So I'm going to just read a quote from a book on resilience, on parenting for resilience, and it's speaking about the need to let go. And it says, as parents, we need to step back, hold the safety of the boundaries, and watch our children fall and scrape their knees. Somehow, when they know we are watching from a distance and not rushing in, they believe that they can get up, and they do. This is one of the most valuable gifts we can give our children, the knowledge that we believe in their ability to grow and their capacity to go on to live happy lives without us. Ultimately, that's our goal as parents, to raise kids who go into the world and flourish. We need to allow them to make mistakes, believe in them, and allow them to risk.
Okay, I'm going to flip through the next section. We had too much fun so far and over-prepared, and I want to get you talking because that's the real value of this session. So, why do we model growth? Because our success in our world is going to be very different from what success looks like in our children's world. The things that characterize our successful trajectory will be very different from the things by which they will be measured as successful. And we've got to help our kids to develop grit so they can thrive in a world that few of us as parents actually understand fully. They are literally like Sir Christopher Columbus on the edge of sailing over into Abyss, the way things are changing. So a couple of points very, very quickly. We need to understand as parents the changing dynamics of the world our kids are facing. We need to accept technological advancements and automation. We can't fight those things. We can't go to Shetlands. We can't long for the way things were, because the way things are is the way they are, and that's the way they're going to be. Some of the research from the World Economic Forum said that automation is expected to displace around 75,000 jobs.
Million.
75 million jobs by 2025. Which is frightening. Those are jobs that you know, that maybe you thinking you can motivate your kids to do. The same research said it will also create around 133 million new roles. So there's going to be more for them to do, not less, although there'll be less of what you thought they should do. The gig economy and remote work is a reality. The fact that you grew up probably thinking of going to office or going to a classroom. Kids today can and will work anywhere. Met JP's cousin last week, who he and his wife empty nest. He's what, in his 50s? They are nomads. They are real modern day nomads. They're professionals. They can ply their trade anywhere in the world, and they do. That's going to be the world of work. It's a very different one. They're changing skill requirements. They say that by 2030, up to 375 massive future facing our kids, where what they know even today is not going to stand them in good stead for what they need to know for tomorrow. So we and our kids need to be proactive in upskilling and reskilling ourselves to stay competitive in this fast changing world. In prepping our kids for their future, I think we can help them in our dialogue with them around the kitchen table when the TV set is switched off, by teaching them a hard skill like research and market analysis. That same fish paste that JP and I love is off the South African market because they're not enough for the two of us, and they're not selling enough. So there are reasons why the favorite thing is no longer present. They're hard research skills that we need to encourage our kids to interrogate as to why things happen. There's the networking and building of connections. Those are the soft skills. One of the things I've loved about Greenhouse is the close connection amongst those people who choose to have this as an expression of their faith, where there's lots of hugging, there's lots of connecting, there's lots of remembering of names, there's lots of seeing people. That's a soft skill. We can model that for our kids, because in a world where everyone looks at a screen, the person who can look in someone else's eye and remember their name has actually got a foot in the door for a good job. We've got to develop transferable skills on an ongoing basis. I tried tonight with audiovisual stuff. I'm obviously a novel, but I'll get better next week, I promise. I've learned from some mistakes this time. So we're on an ongoing learning curve. We've got to embrace that. So in the ever-changing job market, possessing transferable skills is highly advantageous. World Economic Future of Jobs report emphasizes that by 2025, that's in 2 years, well, a year and a half's time, next year, whoa, the skills in highest demand will be analytical thinking, innovation, and active learning. Developing transferable skills such as critical thinking, communication, and adaptability can make job seekers more versatile and sought after by employees, and all those things take grit. The innovator's got to try his best, pick himself up when he fails, do it again. The person who wants to go for a job is going to knock on door after door after door and still go into the 30th interview with a bright eye and a spark and are willing to connect. So grit is the center. So what is grit again? In closing, grit is passion. You said this before. A strong interest in an activity or a goal.
Perseverance, the ability to keep going in spite of obstacles, setbacks, or failures.
It's about determination, about really wanting to achieve success and to always progress towards one's goal.
It's about focus, to be able to keep concentrating on and working on things even when faced with challenges.
It's about resilience, the ability to bounce back, to pick yourself up when you're feeling battered and bruised, when things go wrong, yet to stay motivated. So that's our input on grit and resilience now. For next week, just to give you a heads up, we'd love you all to come back. We're going to do some serious praying about the weather. It will hopefully be not as cold. What we would like to do, if on that WhatsApp group, the parenting group, if there's something you need more information on or something that you'd like an opinion on, pop it on there and we'll try and weave that into the narrative next week. What we want to do as a prime input is plan some practical things that we have done as a family to build our tribe. I said earlier on, my eldest daughter is 40, and my throwaway line is always that the first 40 years of parenting are the hardest. I believe it gets better after that. So we don't come as the experts and say, do it our way. We just want to come and chuck some ideas in that work for us. And if any of them would work for you, they're yours to have. We want to learn from you some of the good things that you in turn have learned to do with your kids that have made them the unique, wonderful people they are. And then we're now going to go into that thing where you're going to do two things. We've spoken too much, my apologies. You've been sitting for over an hour, and even if you're wearing long johns like me, your bum is probably numb. So won't you have a stand up and a stretch and just get your circulation going again? Fill your glasses, grab something to eat, and I'm going to give you 2 minutes just to get your blood circulating. Then I'm going to pop a couple of questions for you to dialogue in your table groups.